Lieutenant Commander Asher Ward swiped a bead of sweat from his brow as he adjusted the collar of his undersuit. The environmental controls in Sector Epsilon of the Helion Core Research Station had been on the fritz for the better part of a week. Engineers blamed a series of misrouted coolant flows. Asher blamed whatever alien corporation the Alliance had subcontracted for station maintenance. He ducked into the maintenance subdeck, a dimly lit utility space tucked beneath the station's power relay systems. Just a few minutes to cool down, change shirts, and reset before grabbing something vaguely edible from the mess. Stripping off his damp uniform top, Asher let out a low groan of relief, the recycled air doing little to stop the rising temperature but still better than nothing. He reached into his duffel for a dry shirt when the door hissed open without warning. "I didn't expect, oh!" The voice stopped him in his tracks. He turned quickly, shirt in hand, startled. Standing in the doorway was an alien female, one unlike any he had encountered during his 7 years in the fleet. Her fur was a sleek bronze hue that shimmered faintly in the low light, short and finely groomed, patterned with subtle stripes. Her face, though feline in structure, had an unmistakable intelligence in her wide golden eyes and expressive brows. Large pointed ears twitched reflexively, and a long, sinuous tail curled instinctively behind her. "I'm sorry," she stammered in heavily accented Galactic common. "The room was marked unoccupied." Asher grabbed his shirt and held it against his bare chest. "Clearly the system's as broken as the air filters. No harm done, I just wasn't expecting company." The feline woman blinked twice, her pupils narrowing slightly. Her voice dropped into a lower, more formal tone. "I'll find another diagnostics panel." "Wait," Asher said before he could think twice. "I've never seen you before. You're not part of the military detail, are you?" She hesitated, seeming unsure if the question was casual or confrontational. "No. My name is Feline. I serve with the Xenthari Biogenetics Initiative. I was sent to study your agriculture modules." "Lieutenant Commander Asher Ward," he said, lowering the shirt. "Earth Defense. Sorry again about the awkward intro." Verine's whiskers twitched, her tail curling again in what Asher interpreted as either amusement or nervous energy. She stepped inside just slightly. "No apology necessary. Your physiology is interesting." Asher grinned. "You checking me out, Doctor?" Her fur darkened around her cheeks. "Curiosity. Only curiosity." "Uh-huh." He offered a hand. She regarded it a moment, then mirrored the gesture with a paw-like hand of her own, the claws carefully retracted. Her palm was soft, warm, and padded. "I guess we're both breaking protocol now," Asher said. "But sometimes rules get in the way of knowing who we're really working beside." Feline nodded slowly. "Yes. Sometimes." As she left, her golden eyes lingered on him just a second too long. And Asher, standing alone in the flickering maintenance bay, couldn't help but think, this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. Asher Ward sat in the observation alcove near the hydroponics lab, the wide viewport casting blue shadows across his sharp features as he stirred the contents of a rehydrated protein pack with a grimace. It tasted like salted plastic, standard fare aboard Helion Core. But his mind wasn't on food. It hadn't been since the encounter in the maintenance bay. Feline. He repeated her name silently, the syllables strange yet graceful. There was something about her presence he couldn't shake. Her voice, her posture, the way her golden eyes had traced over him with an intensity that wasn't entirely professional. "Lieutenant Commander," a familiar voice interrupted. Chief Enzo Keller, his security counterpart and longtime drinking buddy, slid into the bench across from him with a sly grin. "You've been wandering near the civvy wing all day. Looking for someone?" Asher didn't glance up. "Just patrolling. Making sure our guests aren't sticking their claws where they shouldn't." Enzo chuckled. "Funny you should say claws. Because I heard about a certain feline xenobiologist walking in on you half naked. Station gossip spreads fast, man." "Great," Asher muttered. "Exactly the kind of legacy I wanted. Hey, at least they're saying she looked impressed." Asher shot him a look. Keller laughed again. Joking. Sort of. But listen, word is her research division's more than it appears. Some kind of cross-species gene integration initiative. High-level stuff. She's not just growing lettuce in the AG dome. That caught Asher's attention. Gene integration? As in hybrid studies? Keller shrugged. Just repeating what I hear. But someone up top approved it, and you know they don't send fringe researchers to a Class 3 station unless they're expecting results. Asher pushed his tray aside, appetite gone. If Feline was part of something more ambitious than agricultural monitoring, it explained her quiet intensity. And if she had been working on hybrid research. He stood, straightening his uniform. Thanks, Enzo. Where you headed? Just taking another stroll near the labs. Sure you are, Keller called after him. Try not to start another diplomatic incident by taking your shirt off. Asher made his way through the station's curved corridors, his boots echoing softly on the metal flooring. The civilian science wing was unusually quiet, the labs dim and sealed. A soft violet glow seeped from under one of the doors labeled Xenthari Biogenetics Initiative Restricted Access. He hesitated, then tapped the door chime. There was a pause before it hissed open. Feline stood inside, wearing a sterile coat over her lithe frame. Her tail flicked once at the sight of him. Lieutenant Commander, she said, voice guarded. I didn't expect you. Just Asher is fine, he said. Mind if I come in? She tilted her head slightly, then stepped aside. You're violating 2 protocols by entering an active genetics lab without clearance. I'll risk it, he replied, eyes scanning the walls of glowing biotanks and scanning rigs. What exactly are you working on, Feline? She regarded him a long moment, as if calculating his capacity for understanding. You already suspect. I heard rumors. Then I will confirm them, she said, walking over to a suspended chamber housing what looked like an embryonic root system wrapped in strands of glowing biofiber. We are testing the possibility of cross-species compatibility. Not just for reproduction, but for adaptability, healing, survival, evolution. And where do humans fit into this? Feline met his gaze. Your species is adaptable, flexible, stubborn. Traits we admire. And that some of us find personally compelling. The air thickened between them. Asher stepped closer. Personally? She took a slow breath, her fur bristling ever so slightly. I have studied many species. But until I saw you, I had never felt curiosity rooted in something deeper than science. Asher looked down at the glowing sample beside them. So what happens when science and curiosity start looking a lot like attraction? Feline's pupils narrowed, her voice a whisper. Then the boundaries blur. Neither moved. Neither spoke. And both knew the station, and the galaxy, was about to change. Feline busied her hands with a touchscreen console, but Asher could tell her thoughts were no longer on the data scrolling across the display. Her ears twitched subtly, betraying her focus. She was watching him from the corner of her eye, measuring his reaction, maybe trying to hide her own confusion. He moved slowly, giving her space, but stepped closer to the terminal where she stood. This work, he said quietly. Does it have official Alliance approval? Feline hesitated, her tail curling behind her in slow, deliberate arcs. In part. The agricultural research is the public face of our project. The deeper genetics work is technically classified. Asher frowned. So if someone found out you were experimenting with hybrid gene stability, I would be recalled to Xenthari space immediately, she said, her voice flat, and likely barred from ever conducting research again. He studied her carefully. Then why tell me? She turned to him, finally looking him directly in the eyes. Because I believe in transparency. And because I don't think you'll report me. You're right, he said. I won't. But Feline, you should know, this kind of research makes people nervous. Even on Helion Core. Because it forces them to face what they don't understand. She replied softly. That the genetic lines between species may not be as rigid as we were taught. Asher crossed his arms. You said something yesterday. That you found me fascinating. I did, she admitted, her voice dropping an octave. I still do. There was a vulnerability in her tone that Asher hadn't expected, and it grounded him. For all her scientific authority, Vereen stood in front of him now with the same unease, the same uncertainty, that he felt. I've served in the military 10 years, he said after a moment. Fought across 3 systems. I've faced pirates, insurgents, hostile wildlife, vacuum breaches, and a mutiny. But you're the first thing that's actually gotten under my skin. She blinked, taken aback. Asher laughed once, quietly. And I can't stop thinking about you. Vereen looked down, her claws gently tapping the console's edge. We're from different worlds. Literally. Our cultures, our biology, our futures are ours to define, he finished. The silence that followed was unlike the ones that had come before. It wasn't awkward. It was electric. She stepped toward him, slowly, deliberately. Her movements were graceful, her feline features composed, but Asher sensed the internal war beneath her calm exterior. What are you proposing, Lieutenant Commander? He reached out and brushed the back of his hand along her cheek fur. Dinner. Vereen blinked. Dinner? I figure if I'm going to fall for an interstellar geneticist with whiskers and a tail, he said, I might as well start with a meal. A slow smile spread across her feline lips, revealing a glint of sharp teeth. You humans are strange. But charming. So is that a yes? She nodded, her tail flicking with subtle excitement. Yes. But I choose the location. You have a preference? She tilted her head. There's a quiet observation chamber near the Arboretum. It receives sunlight from the planet's orbit every 7.3 hours. The heat reminds me of home. I'll bring the rations. You bring the sunlight. Asher turned to leave, but her voice stopped him in the doorway. Asher, she said. He looked back. Don't wear a shirt. He laughed, shaking his head as the door slid shut between them. And Vereen, standing alone now in her lab, let herself smile. For the first time since arriving on Helion Core, the walls she had built so carefully around her heart began to shift. The Helion Core's Arboretum was one of the few places aboard the station that felt alive. Lush with bioluminescent flora from a dozen Alliance member worlds, the chamber shimmered in greens, blues, and soft violets. Tall growths from Earth, Pyrrha, Xenthari Prime, and even distant Sylvan 3 stretched toward the sunbeam that pierced through the reinforced dome above, bathing the space in gentle warmth. Most humans came here for quiet reflection or meditation. Asher arrived early, dressed down in station-issue black slacks and a loose gray undershirt, not quite shirtless, but not regulation either. He had wrestled with the idea of keeping it casual or formal, ultimately deciding that authenticity would win out. He didn't want to impress Vereen with protocol. He wanted her to see him. She entered minutes later, and Asher forgot how to breathe. Her attire was a flowing, sleeveless wrap of deep copper and black, clearly designed for comfort in heat but elegant in its simplicity. The fabric shimmered faintly, complementing the bronze sheen of her fur. Her ears flicked at the sound of the door closing behind her, but her golden eyes found his almost instantly. You dress, she observed. I compromise, he said, stepping forward with 2 ration packs in hand. Didn't want to get written up for public indecency. Pity. Her tone was dry, but her tail swayed with barely concealed amusement. They settled on a low stone bench beneath a canopy of translucent vines. Asher handed her a pack of thermally warmed grains mixed with roasted protein slices, one of the few station meals that didn't taste entirely synthetic. Vereen took a bite and paused. Savory. Salty. Strange. He smirked. High praise coming from someone who probably eats photonic algae souffle. Her whiskers twitched. Our meals are different, but not always better. I've grown curious about human flavor profiles. Oh? That's a dangerous path. Why? Because you'll want more. She tilted her head, studying him. Is that a warning or a promise? He laughed, and for a moment, the artificial stars above them shimmered with a little more light. Their conversation drifted easily, as if this weren't the first dinner shared between two species from distant worlds. Vereen told him about her upbringing on Xenthari Prime, a planet of intense heat, wide open skies, and matriarchal academic orders. Her family had expected her to stay local, take a research seat within the Planetary Gene Council. Instead, she left for the stars. I wanted to explore the unknown, she said, toying with her now empty ration container. But I didn't expect the unknown to stare back at me with eyes that look like yours. Asher leaned back on his hands, looking at her. You know this can't just be a fling, Vereen. Not with what you're working on. Not with the politics. The science. The risks. I know. Then why agree to dinner? She was quiet for a moment. Because you made me feel seen. Not as a scientist. Not as a curiosity. As a being worth knowing. Asher's throat tightened at the honesty in her words. He reached out slowly, brushing his fingers against the side of her face. Her fur was impossibly soft, warm like the heat of a living sun. I want to know you, he said. She didn't respond. Instead, she leaned in and pressed her forehead gently against his, a gesture that instinctively made his heart stutter. Her breath was warm against his lips, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders. Their moment balanced between cultures, between species, between the rules of logic and the pull of something deeper. Then her lips brushed his. Soft. Delicate. New. Asher responded instinctively, his arms wrapping around her waist, her tail curling loosely around his leg. It wasn't hunger or lust. It was recognition of another being who saw through the boundaries of biology and form and found meaning in connection. When they finally pulled apart, her eyes fluttered open. There are implications. Yeah, he whispered. But for once, I don't care. The next morning, Asher woke alone. The warm indent where Vereen had curled beside him on the bench was still there, but the feline woman had slipped away quietly before dawn. He wasn't surprised. The moment between them and the Arboretum had been intimate, real, but also terrifying. They'd crossed a threshold few dared to acknowledge, and the weight of it wasn't lost on either of them. Asher rolled to his feet, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He had an early briefing with Admiral Reese, the Helion Corps station commander, a man known for his unflinching adherence to protocol. This meeting wasn't one to be missed, no matter how his thoughts lingered on golden eyes and quiet laughter under glowing vines. The command deck was all business when Asher arrived. Uniformed officers passed data pads between desks, and hollow charts hovered above the operations table in the center. Admiral Reese stood at the far end, arms clasped behind his back, gaze fixed on the stars beyond the glass wall. Lieutenant Commander Ward, the Admiral said without turning. Have a seat. Asher took the offered chair, posture straightening automatically. We've received word from Alliance High Command, Reese continued. They've been monitoring the Xenthari biogenetics initiative's work closely. It seems your dinner companion's division has raised eyebrows on more than one world. Asher's blood ran cold. Vereen? The Admiral turned, expression unreadable. Dr. Vereen has not violated any direct treaties. Yet. But she is conducting advanced genetic research aboard an Earth defense-controlled station. That presents a diplomatic risk. I wasn't aware of any breach in her conduct, sir. Reese narrowed his eyes. You weren't just unaware, Lieutenant Commander. You were present. In the Arboretum. Security logs show you spent the entire night there. Asher didn't flinch. We talked. Shared ideas. Nothing more. Careful with your phrasing, Reese said sharply. You're an officer of the Earth Defense Fleet. Any relationship you engage in, particularly with a foreign researcher involved in classified biology, can have consequences far beyond personal risk. Asher's jaw clenched. Understood, sir. Reese leaned forward. You may believe this is about two individuals connecting. But you and Dr. Vereen are not just individuals. You represent entire species, and every interaction becomes a precedent. This station is a crucible of interstellar politics. A misstep here doesn't end in broken hearts, Commander. It ends in broken treaties. Asher left the command deck more troubled than when he'd arrived. He found Feline later that afternoon in Lab 3, her ears pinned back and tail twitching in frustration. Several of her specimens had been flagged and quarantined by Alliance oversight, and 2 of her assistants had been reassigned without explanation. They're dismantling my work, she growled under her breath. One protocol violation at a time. Asher stepped inside and closed the door behind him. It's not just the science, Feline. It's us. She froze. I just left a meeting with Admiral Reese. He knows. About us. About last night. Feline turned slowly, her golden eyes unreadable. Then it begins. He nodded. Alliance is watching. Earth's leadership doesn't want interspecies complications that aren't sanctioned. And I doubt the Xenthari Council would be any more forgiving if they knew. Her voice was quiet. They'd strip my research license. Revoke my field status. Maybe worse. Asher crossed to her. So what do we do? She looked up at him, eyes burning with quiet defiance. We continue. Carefully. Quietly. But we continue. You sure? Her tail curled gently around his wrist. I've studied hundreds of species across the stars. None ever made me feel like this. If that means risking what I've built, then yes. I'm sure. Asher leaned in and pressed his forehead gently against hers. We'll face whatever comes next, he whispered. Together. And neither of them saw the tiny drone camera blinking silently in the corner. 3 levels above the lab, inside a dim control hub accessible only to senior command personnel, Admiral Reese stood silently as the surveillance feed replayed on a translucent screen. Beside him, a tall, silver-uniformed envoy from the Alliance Security Bureau folded his hands behind his back. You were right, the envoy said. They've crossed the line. Reese gave a tight nod. This can't be allowed to spiral. We've already seen what unchecked cross-species experimentation leads to. Veteran 7 is still quarantined. I'll issue a priority report to the Council, the envoy said. But we need to handle this delicately. If the media catches wind of an interspecies liaison involving a military officer and an unsanctioned geneticist, public trust will fracture. Reese watched the screen as Feline's golden eyes met Asher's once more. We need to isolate and contain the problem. Quietly. Back in the lab, Asher and Feline stood over a holodisplay of genetic data, reviewing a fresh set of results from her remaining active samples. Feline's claws hovered above the interface as she expanded one of the double helix structures, except it wasn't just a double helix. It was a hybrid. Her breath caught. Asher, she murmured, tapping the strand to stabilize the scan. This isn't from the agricultural trials. He leaned in. Then what is it? She stared in disbelief. It's me. My DNA. And yours. Asher stiffened. What? Feline stepped away from the console, heart pounding. I didn't authorize this sample to be analyzed. The only way this scan exists is if a trace was collected without my knowledge. You think they're spying on you? I think someone already knows what we've done, she said, her voice tight. Asher's thoughts raced. And they're trying to prove a genetic match. Or fabricate one, she added grimly. To justify their own agenda. He clenched his fists. We have to get ahead of this. But Feline shook her head. No. We can't go public, not yet. Not until we know who's watching and why. Footsteps echoed outside the lab. Asher stepped away from the console just as the door opened and a pair of Earth Defense officers entered. Lieutenant Commander Ward, the lead said. You're wanted on the command deck. Now. What's this about? He asked, glancing quickly at Feline, who stood motionless by the scanner. Security matter. Orders from Admiral Reese. Feline's ears flattened. Asher gave her one last look, don't panic, then left with the officers. The moment the door shut, Feline locked down her lab and initiated a silent data backup. Her fingers trembled as she activated an encrypted channel. Dr. Sova, she whispered into the comm, contacting her mentor back on Xenthari Prime. They know. The feline voice on the other end sounded strained. Stay calm, Feline. Have they detained you? Not yet. But Asher's been taken for questioning. I fear they're going to isolate him, or worse. There was a pause. Then you must protect the data. If your research is confiscated, it will be used against you. Against all of us. Feline nodded slowly. Understood. She disconnected and turned to her workbench. The results from the unauthorized hybrid sample still hovered above the console. And for the first time since her arrival, Feline was afraid. Not for herself. But for the child the scan had just revealed, impossible, unintended, and undeniably real. The command deck felt colder than usual, the air sterile, heavy with unsaid accusations. Asher stood at parade rest in the middle of the Admiral's office, 2 silent security officers flanking the door behind him. Rhys sat with his arms folded, flanked by the same Alliance envoy from before, Thalen Voss, if Asher remembered right. A name whispered with respect and quiet fear throughout the fleet. You've been busy, Lieutenant Commander, Rhys said without preamble. Asher kept his expression neutral. I perform my duties as ordered. And what about your extracurricular activities? Thalen asked smoothly, sliding a data pad across the desk. Are you performing those under Earth defense orders too? Asher didn't look down at the pad. He knew what it contained. I assume you've been watching, he said. Rhys leaned forward. Surveillance was initiated only after your unusual presence in civilian zones became a concern. What we found raised more questions than answers. Thalen tapped the pad. We've verified a genetic sample taken from contaminated lab equipment. Cross-checked against your military health records. Asher's jaw tightened. Contaminated, huh? The hybridization is real, Thalen said. Unprecedented. But what matters more than the science is the fallout. You've violated interspecies conduct codes, exposed classified personnel to diplomatic risk, and potentially fathered. Stop right there, Asher interrupted, voice suddenly low and firm. You're not going to reduce this to a scandal. Feline is a brilliant researcher. Her work could change everything. And if you think threatening her is going to scare me, you're wrong. Rhys raised a hand to calm the tension. No one is threatening anyone. Yet. But we need answers. Did you knowingly engage in reproductive contact with a Xenthari citizen while under Earth defense contract? I engaged with a woman I respect, Asher said coldly. If that's a crime, maybe our laws need rewriting. Thalen smirked. You're not being court-martialed, Lieutenant Commander. Not yet. But you are being reassigned. Asher blinked. Reassigned? Effective immediately, Rhys said. You're being relocated to the diplomatic wing. You'll remain on Halion Core as liaison to the Xenthari delegation. Consider it containment. And Feline? Rhys glanced to Thalen, who nodded once. She will remain on the station under observation. Her lab has been locked down. She's not under arrest, but she's restricted from accessing any restricted Alliance network systems. Asher's fists clenched at his sides. So you cage her and me. You're lucky, Lieutenant Commander, Thalen said calmly. Some on the council wanted a full extraction and interrogation. Others, less tolerant, wanted her deported or worse. You've bought her time. How you use it will decide what comes next. Back in her quarters, Feline paced. She'd sensed it the moment Asher left the lab. Something had shifted. Her access codes had been scrubbed, her terminal rights locked behind layers of protocol she no longer held clearance for. Every message to Xenthari Prime bounced back encrypted or delayed. They were cutting her off. She gritted her teeth, her claws tapping a hard rhythm on the glass table. For years, she'd believed her biology made her unfit for anything beyond sterile analysis. Her slender build, her slightly irregular fur pattern, marks of genetic deviation in her people's rigid code of breeding perfection. Now she had undeniable proof that her body had done something no other Xenthari female ever had. She had conceived. And they wanted to hide it. When Asher returned hours later, she rushed to him, golden eyes wide with fear and fire. "They know," she said. "I know," he replied. "They've reassigned me. Locked you out. And they're hoping we'll lie down and behave." Varine's tail lashed. "I won't be their specimen. Or your government's mistake." "You're not a mistake," Asher said fiercely. "You're the most incredible person I've ever known. And we're going to protect this. The child. You." She stared at him, her breath shallow. "Then we need allies. Fast." Asher nodded grimly. "Because next time they knock, it won't be for questions." Helion Core's Central Arboretum had long been Varine's sanctuary. But with her lab locked down and surveillance tightening, she and Asher knew they needed a new refuge, one off the record. Thankfully, Asher had something no bureaucrat or alliance overseer could replicate: experience in bending the rules. He led her through a maintenance tunnel buried behind the water recycling wing, past unused access ports and flickering light panels, down into a chamber marked for decommissioned hydroponics systems. Once part of a failed atmospheric trial, the section had been long abandoned and nearly forgotten. "What is this place?" Verine asked, brushing cobweb-like fungal threads from the control panel. "Old project from the second Helion expansion," Asher said. "Supposed to be an emergency agricultural buffer. Never got the funding. But the systems still work, mostly." He flicked a switch, and the walls lit with pale green light. The chamber responded to their presence with a soft hum as dormant bulbs sputtered to life overhead, revealing rows of half-grown earth vines twining through rusted scaffolding. The air was warm, rich with old soil and filtered moisture. "This can be our space," he said. "No cameras. No oversight. Just us." Verine stepped deeper into the garden, her claws brushing one of the twisting vines. "It smells like life in here," she murmured. "Like the wild. Like home." She turned to him, the dim lights casting her bronze fur in liquid gold. "Why are you doing this?" "You already know. I want to hear you say it." Asher crossed the space between them in 2 long strides. "Because I love you. Because you're not just part of something important, you are something important. And I won't let anyone erase you." Her breath caught. "Asher, I don't care what the Alliance says. What the Xenthari expect. I want this. I want you." Verine didn't speak. Instead, she pressed her palm to his chest, right over his heart, her claws retracted, her touch careful. Her tail wound slowly around his thigh in a subtle expression of acceptance, affection. "We will need to move carefully," she whispered. "There are still those who would take the child from us." He nodded. "I've already contacted Chief Keller." Quietly. "He still has connections in civilian transport. If things go south, we'll have a way off this station." Verine narrowed her eyes. "Running is not my goal." "Then what is?" She walked past him, tail flicking once, and opened a small sample pouch from her coat. Inside was a preserved sliver of genetic code, a stabilized strand of hybrid DNA, extracted before her access had been revoked. "This," she said, "this proves the future is more than what we've been told. It could change everything about how the Alliance sees compatibility, integration, the possibilities of life itself." Asher's brows furrowed. "They'll never let this go public. Then we won't give them the choice." He stepped beside her. "You're talking about exposure. Releasing the data to every scientific hub in the galaxy." Verine nodded once. "Broadcast it. Make it impossible to suppress. That's war," Asher warned. "Political, scientific, maybe literal war." Verine looked up at him, her golden eyes gleaming. "Then let's make sure our child grows up in a universe where truth isn't feared. Where she doesn't have to hide." "She?" Asher blinked. Verine's ears lifted. "The scans confirm it." Asher exhaled slowly. "A daughter." Their hands met in the warmth of the abandoned garden. Beneath crumbling lights and silent vines, a plan was forming, quiet, bold, and destined to shake the stars. The next day began with sirens. Red lights pulsed through the corridors of Helion Core as a station-wide alert triggered lockdown procedures. Doors sealed, personnel rerouted. The official report cited a containment breach in the lower reactor wing, but Asher and Vereen knew better. This wasn't about radiation. It was about pressure. They were being isolated. Asher ducked into a side corridor as two security officers jogged past in full containment gear. He tapped his earpiece, encrypted signal activated. Vereen, status? I'm fine, she replied, her voice calm but tight. Locked in the auxiliary genetics lab. They haven't found me yet, but it's only a matter of time. Stay there. I'm coming. No, she said quickly. If they catch you too, the broadcast won't happen. Asher hesitated. You sure you're okay? A brief pause. I'm scared. But I'm ready. He sighed. Then we stick to the plan. In their hidden garden, the upload terminal blinked, halfway through transmitting the encrypted research package Vereen had spent months compiling: hybrid viability data, gestational logs, hormone compatibility ratios. Proof of a miracle wrapped in layers of scientific precision. Proof that love had rewritten biology itself. But the signal wasn't stable. Helion Core's systems had throttled outbound comms since the lockdown. Asher needed a stronger connection, and there was only one place on the station that had an unshielded uplink. The comm spire. Top of the station. Restricted. Guarded. Of course. Vereen crouched beneath one of the decommissioned stasis pods in the auxiliary lab, her fingers working furiously at a handheld device linked to the station's backup server. She had activated an old diagnostic port that predated the current security firewall, one of many relics in the aging system that had escaped official updates. Through it, she had one shot. She uploaded a decoy log, fake scans, bogus notes, and a forged embryo image. It would buy time, draw attention away from the real file being uploaded in the garden. Her hand went to her abdomen. The flutter of nerves in her belly wasn't just anxiety. It was motion. Subtle. Barely perceptible, but real. Her child was alive. Moving. Growing. And she would not let her be stolen. Asher reached the lift to the comm spire just as two EDF guards exited. He saluted casually, pretending to be on official errand. The younger one nodded without question. The older one squinted but said nothing. Inside the lift, Asher entered his old override code. It still worked. The doors sealed with a hiss, and the platform began its slow ascent. He exhaled. His heart raced, not from fear, but from certainty. The universe was watching, whether it knew it yet or not. And what he and Vereen had found, what they had created, would force that universe to choose. To evolve. Or to be left behind. The lift doors opened. Asher stepped out into the comm spire, the highest point of Helion Core Station. The chamber hummed with power. Towering data relays and atmospheric modulators lined the circular room, their lights blinking in rhythmic pulses. From the massive viewports, he could see the station curve away beneath him, and beyond that the stars. He crossed to the primary console, punching in the bypass code Vereen had memorized from an earlier system audit. The station's emergency bandwidth was unlocked for a narrow 30-second window every 22 minutes, just long enough to slip a data packet through. A light on the terminal blinked green. Upload ready. Destination: Distributed Science Archive /level Sigma access. Tag: Cross-species hybridization / confirmed human-Xenthari embryo. Flagged for urgent review, unauthorized containment risk. He hovered his hand over the send command. If he pressed it, they'd never be able to hide again. Every research facility in the galaxy would receive the file. Every government. Every curious scientist. Every opportunist. But the truth would be free. He thought of Vereen's hands pressed to her stomach. Of the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of possibilities. Of their daughter, a being who should never have existed, and yet somehow did. He pressed send. The console flared with light, and the screen displayed confirmation as the packet dispersed across the network, fragmented, mirrored, scattered through thousands of archives. Data released. Irreversible. The hum of the chamber shifted, growing louder. Red lights strobed from the overhead sensors. A klaxon blared. Unauthorized transmission detected. Security inbound. Asher stepped back from the console just as the lift doors reopened. 2 armed guards stormed in. "Lieutenant Commander Ward, step away from the terminal," one barked. Asher raised his hands slowly. "You're too late." The younger guard looked at the console, reading the blinking status. His expression faltered. "You have any idea what you've just done?" the older one snapped. Asher met his gaze. "Yeah. I just gave the galaxy something it can't bury." Down in the auxiliary lab, Vereen saw it happen. A signal blinked across her diagnostic panel. Upload confirmed. Her breath caught, and her tail curled tightly around her leg in instinctive reaction. They'd done it. But the celebration was short-lived. Outside her door, heavy boots approached. A hand slammed against the keypad, followed by a voice through the speaker. "Dr. Vereen, open this door. By order of Alliance Command." She placed one paw gently over her belly. "No," she whispered. Asher was escorted to the station brig, hands bound, his uniform stripped of rank insignia. He said nothing as they placed him in the containment cell. A pane of energy shimmered into place between him and the corridor. Across the way, Admiral Reese stood with arms folded. "You've made things very difficult," the Admiral said. Asher met his gaze. "Good. Maybe now someone will think. Do you think the Alliance wants this kind of chaos? Cross-species pregnancy? Genetic scandal? Do you think your daughter, if she survives, will be celebrated?" "No," Asher said. "I think she'll change them." That night, in a quiet medical wing under armed watch, Vereen lay on a diagnostic bed, sensors surrounding her as doctors scanned the developing life inside her. One of the medtechs, a young human woman, glanced at the readings and blinked. "There's something you should see." Vereen sat up slightly. "What is it?" The tech turned the screen. The scan showed a heartbeat. Not just healthy, but strong. Unusually strong. Accelerated cellular division. Adaptive growth patterns. Vereen stared, whispering only one word. Extraordinary. And for the first time since she learned she was pregnant, she felt something deeper than fear. Hope. The fallout came quickly. Within 72 hours of the transmission, over 100 major research institutions across 12 planetary systems had downloaded Vereen's data. Debates ignited across interstellar news networks. Was the hybridization real? Was it ethical? Was it replicable? Some hailed it as the dawn of a new era, proof that sentient species across the galaxy could unite in ways beyond trade and treaties. Others denounced it as an abomination, a dangerous crossing of sacred biological lines. On Helion Core, tension thickened like fog. Vereen remained in isolation, her movement restricted to a single medical wing monitored around the clock. Though technically not a prisoner, she felt like one. Even the nurses were rotated constantly, none of them allowed more than a few hours near her. She hadn't seen Asher since the transmission. She didn't even know if he was still on the station. She dreamed of him. Of his steady arms around her waist. Of the quiet way he said, "we," instead of "you," every time they talked about the baby. She feared she would never see him again. In the brig, Asher sat alone, head bowed, his thoughts locked on Vereen. No one had spoken to him in hours. No trial date had been set. He had no legal representation. But he wasn't worried for himself. He was worried for them. He had gambled everything on the truth, on the idea that once the world saw the evidence, they would have no choice but to accept it. And now, silence. Until a soft chime echoed from the far end of the corridor. He stood as the energy barrier flickered and deactivated. A woman entered, tall, commanding, and dressed in a dark blue uniform with Alliance sigils that denoted both rank and judicial authority. "I'm Tribunal Envoy Marin Rel," she said. You're Lieutenant Commander Asher Ward. Used to be, he said. She smiled faintly. Not necessarily. The Council has received your case. The data you released has been verified by independent sources. It's legitimate. The embryo is real. His breath caught. And Vereen? She's under observation. Safe. The pregnancy is stable. But there are pressures. From who? Everyone, Marin said. Some want to separate you. Study the child in isolation. Others want the data sealed and you both reassigned to different systems. Quietly. Politically. And you? She paused. I think the child is a turning point. He stepped forward. Then help us. Help her. Marin studied him for a moment, then nodded. I can't release you officially. But I can arrange a meeting. 5 minutes. No guards. No recordings. Asher's voice broke slightly. That's all I need. The door to the medical wing hissed open. Vereen looked up, expecting another doctor. Instead, Asher stepped inside, still wearing the gray undersuit from the brig, bruised but standing tall. Her breath caught. Asher. He crossed the room and embraced her without a word. His arms around her were warmth and safety and home all at once. I thought they tried, he whispered. But we're still here. She pressed her forehead to his. She's strong. They ran tests. Her biology is stable. The hybridization isn't just viable, it's thriving. His fingers brushed her stomach. They can't take her. We won't let them. I know, Vereen said. But we need more than defiance. We need a future. He pulled back and looked into her eyes. Then let's build one. Outside the door, Tribunal Envoy Marin Rel waited. A storm was coming. But so was change. Tribunal Envoy Marin Rel sat at the head of the diplomatic chamber, her eyes scanning the gathered representatives. The room had been hastily repurposed from a lecture hall to a negotiation floor. Banners representing the Alliance, Earth Defense, and the Xenthari Council hung behind her like competing ideologies forced to share a table. Seated to her left was Admiral Reese, arms folded, stone-faced. To her right sat Ambassador Sele, the Xenthari liaison, a sleek-furred, pale-furred feline male whose gaze never left the datapad in front of him. And between them, separate but central, were Asher and Vereen. Vereen's fur was brushed smooth and her posture precise, but Asher could see the tension in her tail, curled tightly around the leg of her chair. He reached beneath the table and gently placed his hand on hers. She didn't pull away. Let's begin, Marin said. We are here to address the matter of the cross-species conception between Lieutenant Commander Asher Ward and Dr. Vereen of the Xenthari Biogenetics Initiative. This union has produced a viable hybrid embryo, an event unprecedented in recorded interstellar history. Sele flicked his ears once. Which violates Xenthari biological ethics protocols and was conducted without proper oversight. Our genetic integrity is not to be tampered with through casual experiments. Vereen's ears flattened. It wasn't an experiment, Reese cut in. Nor was it military policy. This entire situation occurred outside official channels. But it has happened. And we need to address it rationally. Rationally? Sele sneered. There are factions on my homeworld demanding Vereen be recalled immediately. Others are calling for a genetic cleansing program to ensure no further corruption spreads. Asher's jaw tightened. You call her corruption? That's your own daughter. There was a silence like a held breath. Marin raised a hand. Personal attacks will be ignored. Let's speak of legal matters. Per Alliance law, any offspring of an Earth defense officer is protected under human jurisdiction. And under Xenthari law, Sele said, all children born to one of our own belong to the maternal lineage's oversight. Our species' survival depends on strict breeding regulations. We will not ignore a genetic event that could alter our very identity. Vereen's voice rang out, clear and fierce. Your regulations labeled me unfit. You said I was too deviant to breed. Now I have proven the opposite. proved that what you called a flaw was an advancement. Celia's tail lashed. You gambled with our future. I created it. Marin interjected. We can debate philosophy for decades, but the child is already growing. Decisions must be made. Therefore, I propose the following terms for joint custody and research access. She pulled up a hollow document outlining her plan: neutral guardianship rights, shared data transparency, non-invasive monitoring protocols, and the formation of a new scientific council composed of both human and Xenthari delegates. Sele read the list in silence, but Asher saw his claws flex. This is unacceptable. Sele growled. Xenthari culture will not be diluted under the banner of human sentiment. You're too late, Asher said, voice hardening. The future you're afraid of is already here. Reese glanced toward Marin. You know this won't hold. Even if you get signatures, extremists on both sides will fight it. Then let them, Marin said. The law must begin somewhere. This child is not a threat. She is precedent. Vereen stood, no longer shaking, no longer uncertain. I won't run. I won't hide. You can exile me from my own world, strip my titles, revoke my degrees, but you can't erase the truth. She exists. She is healthy. And she is ours. Sele rose, his expression unreadable. Then I suggest you prepare. Because there will be consequences. As he exited the room, Vereen slowly sat down again, her body trembling slightly. Asher leaned in close. You were brilliant. She didn't answer, but she turned her head and nuzzled his shoulder in silent gratitude. Marin Rel stood. Then it settled. The council will convene a full vote in 3 days. Until then, protection detail will be assigned to both of you. The war for legitimacy had begun. But Vereen and Asher had made their stand. And the universe had heard them. The silence of the medical wing felt almost sacred now. Tension still lingered in the air after the tribunal hearing, but within the softly lit chamber where Vereen lay, there was peace. For the first time in days, she was alone with Asher. No guards. No monitors blinking red. No whispered politics echoing down sterile hallways. Just her, him, and the rhythmic heartbeat of their unborn child pulsing from the diagnostic scanner beside them. She kicked again, Asher said softly, his hand resting on her belly. Same place as before. She recognizes your voice, Vereen murmured, her tail curled lazily over his thigh. She stirs every time you speak. He smiled. Smart girl already. Vereen tilted her head to look up at him. Her golden eyes, normally alert and calculating, were soft now. Gentle. Have you thought about names? He nodded. I have. One came to me yesterday, during the tribunal. While Sele was talking about corruption. I kept thinking, no. You're wrong. She's not your flaw. She's the bridge. The bridge? Vereen asked, intrigued. Yeah, Asher said. Between worlds. Between what was and what could be. Vereen was quiet for a long time, then whispered. What is the human word for that? He turned toward her. Leora. Vereen repeated the name aloud, letting the syllables roll across her tongue. Leore. In Old Terran languages, it means light. Or gift of light. A fitting name for someone born out of fire and resistance. She exhaled slowly. Leora. Asher watched her reaction carefully. Too human? No, she said quickly, reaching for his hand and lacing her fingers through his. It's perfect. It belongs to both of us now. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, brushing her ears lightly. She purred softly in response, quiet and low, the sound instinctive, intimate. Then Leora she is, he whispered. Elsewhere on the station, unrest had begun to take root. A protest had broken out in the civilian quarters, small at first, just a handful of voices. But they were loud, angry, and coordinated. Some held signs condemning interspecies breeding. Others claimed the child represented a dangerous future, one of biological chaos and cultural dilution. Reese watched the live footage from a surveillance feed, his expression unreadable. Marin Rel stood behind him, arms crossed. "You knew this would happen," he said. "I did," Marin replied. "But they're still a minority. Loud but small. They're going to try something. I can feel it. I've already requested reinforcements," she said. "A diplomatic protection unit will arrive from Alliance Command in 2 days. Until then, I'm assigning a rotating team of officers to the medical wing." Reese nodded slowly. "Make sure they understand their orders. No one gets near that child unless I say so. And if the situation escalates?" He looked out the viewport, where Helion Core's orbital lights flickered like slow-moving stars. "Then we fight the future's enemies with everything we've got." Later that night, Vereen sat upright in her bed, unable to sleep. Asher was dozing nearby, one hand still resting on her abdomen. The lights were dim, casting shadows like vines across the ceiling. And yet her mind raced. She thought of Leora, of what her life might be like. Of the burdens already forming around her before she was even born. Vereen had spent her entire career decoding DNA strands, parsing out the differences that made one species incompatible with another. And then she'd met Asher. And everything she believed about impossibility had changed. She reached over to the bedside table and activated a small recorder. "To my daughter," she whispered, her voice steady. "If you ever hear this, know that you were made not in error, but in defiance of fear. You are not the failure they expected. You are the future we dared to believe in." She paused. "And your name is Leora." It began with a power fluctuation. 1 flicker. Then 2. Then a rolling blackout across Sector 9, the medical wing. Asher was on his feet before the lights fully died. Emergency red strobes activated overhead, casting long shadows across the walls. His hand instinctively went to the emergency panel near the door, but it was locked. Manual override unresponsive. "Vereen," he said urgently, already moving to her bed. "Stay low." She was already sitting up, cradling her belly protectively. "They're coming." "They wouldn't." "They would," she cut in, her voice flat. "They can't control the narrative anymore. The data is out. All they have left is fear." A hiss echoed in the hall, pressurized seals breaking. Asher tensed. The door slid open. 2 masked figures in unmarked gear entered, moving quickly, silently. No insignia. No identifiers. But their purpose was clear. They bypassed the console and headed straight for the bed. Asher moved like a soldier. He intercepted the first one mid-step, driving his shoulder into the intruder's chest, sending him crashing backward into the corridor wall. The second raised a stun baton, but Vereen was already off the bed, claws unsheathed, her hiss primal and furious. The attacker faltered, and that's all Asher needed. He struck low, fast, knocking the baton away, then slammed the attacker into the console with a crack of glass and sparks. The room filled with the harsh scent of burnt circuitry. One of the intruders groaned. The other was unconscious. Asher dragged them both into the corridor, slamming the door shut and sealing it with the last of the emergency lockdown code. Breathing heavily, he turned back to Vereen. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No. But our time here is over." 10 hours later, Tribunal Envoy Marin Rel stood in the command chamber with a message from Alliance Command. "Effective immediately, Dr. Vereen and Lieutenant Commander Ward are to be granted refugee status under diplomatic protection," she said, her voice steady. "They will be relocated to a secure neutral colony until the child is born and all threats against them have been assessed and neutralized." Admiral Reese nodded. "I'll have the station prepare a shuttle and escort." "No shuttle," Marin said. "The Alliance is sending a stealth transport. We want no trace." Reese frowned. "You think more are coming?" "I think fear doesn't stop with the first failed attack. And this child has already changed more than half the Council is willing to admit." In the garden one last time, Asher and Vereen stood side by side. The vines glowed faintly, cradling the air with warmth and memory. "This place gave us everything," Vereen said softly. "And now we leave it behind. Asher took her hand. We take the important parts with us. Liara, she whispered. And each other. They stood in silence, surrounded by life, both grown and growing. Outside, a storm of politics and fear waited, but within, there was calm. A future. And they would face it together. The sky was lavender. Not Earth's blue, not Xenthari Prime's burned gold, but something else entirely, soft, vast, unmarred. The new colony world had no name yet. The Alliance catalog still labeled it designation V375, but to Asher and Feline, it was home. Or at least, it would be. 3 weeks had passed since the attack on Helion Core and their extraction. The Alliance had settled them in a hidden complex surrounded by forested cliffs and glowing freshwater lakes. Feline had taken to the land quickly, spending her afternoons mapping local plant life and recording soil pH like it brought her peace. Asher built things. Systems. Habits. A perimeter sensor grid. A nursery crib from local timber. A routine that gave structure to their waiting. And now they waited, for her. Feline went into labor just before dawn. It was quiet, sudden, and powerful, like the world holding its breath. The Alliance had provided a medical AI and emergency delivery unit, but Feline refused to leave the structure Asher had built. She wanted their daughter born not in a cold station room, but under an open sky. The process was swift but intense. Xenthari physiology favored efficiency, no prolonged contractions, no lengthy labor. But it came with sharp, full-body strain, and Feline's growls echoed into the trees as the sun crested the horizon. Asher stayed beside her the entire time, hands steady, heart in freefall. He didn't know how to do this. He only knew he would never leave her side. And then, there was silence. Followed by a cry, not a scream, but a high-pitched, warbling sound that trembled like music. He looked down. She was perfect. Small and warm, her fur a marbled mix of bronze and pale pink, fine and soft. Her ears were wide, already alert. Her eyes opened almost immediately, brilliant green with flecks of gold. Fingers curled around Asher's thumb. A faint line of soft tendrils ringed her crown. Feline reached out, her arms trembling as she took the child into her embrace. Liara, she whispered, her voice cracking. Asher wiped his eyes, laughing through the emotion. You did it. We did it. Feline looked up at him, exhausted and radiant. She's not just ours anymore, Asher. She's everyone's proof. Months later, the galaxy would speak her name. Not in fear. Not in accusation. But in awe. Liara Ward-Tavari would become the most studied child in modern scientific history, and the most protected. The new Interstellar Genetics Accord, signed 3 years after her birth, would be built around her case, redefining not only compatibility, but equality. She would grow up never seeing a wall between species, only bridges. Her name would be spoken in the halls of the Alliance Senate, etched into the first textbook printed on hybrid genomics, and whispered in rebel colonies as the spark that shattered the old bloodlines. But on that morning, as the wind swirled through the tall grass and birds called out across the canyons, she was only a child in her mother's arms. Small. Soft. Alive. And when her golden eyes blinked up toward the stars, Feline smiled. She sees them, she whispered. Like I did once. Asher wrapped his arm around her shoulder, kissing her temple. And she'll reach them. Someday. And together, beneath a lavender sky, a soldier and a scientist held the universe's first miracle. A daughter. A bridge. A beginning.